to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we are heading back into Disney's The Black Hole to build a little mini diorama. Now recently I did a project here on toy-polloi where I made a little diorama to display some of my Star Wars figures, and once I'd finished that I had a few sheets of styrene sheet left over, and I've been racking my brains as to what I can do with those, and I realised that my Mego Black Hole figures don't really have a good place to be displayed, and I thought I had enough styrene that I could make a little display based on the USS Cygnus bridge that you see in the movie. So that's what we're going to do today. I've drawn up a very basic plan. I've got a few sheets of styrene left, I've got a little bit of mesh, I've got lots of plastic weld. Let's get creating. So what is the plan for this project? Well, as I say, I want a little display area for my Mego Black Hole figures, and my plan is to make a sort of two-tier display piece where we have a lower area and then a little gantry that some other figures can stand on, and I want it to look like the bridge of the USS Cygnus that you see in the movies. And the bridge is actually fairly simple in its construction. It really is just sort of flat surfaces. The main details in the bridge are actually the computer panels, and for those my plan is actually to make some custom stickers to stick on the back wall. So what we have to construct out of styrene sheet is going to be fairly straightforward. We need a flat surface for the floor, we need a flat surface for the back wall. This back wall may need some supports added to it because I'm only going to be using 1mm thick styrene sheet because that's what I've got, so I may need to add some ribs down the back of it to stop it bending in. We're then going to add a gantry that sticks out about 7cm, but I want the gantry to have a mesh floor, and if you've watched my previous diorama build, as I say the Return of the Jedi Jabba's Palace build, I used this sort of mesh which is used for embroidery or something like that. It's a sewing mesh anyway, and it's made out of a nylon-y plastic, but it worked really well to make a sort of grilled floor, so I'm going to be using that to make the gantry. And then we need some other little details, like we need some angled pieces, and I want to make the upper level computer pieces sort of angled in a bit because that's sort of what it looks like in the movies. Then the gantry will also need some railings as well to stop the figures falling off, and you can see in the movie shots there are railings as well. We may need to add some supports to hold this gantry up because it's only going to be held on by about 1cm worth of styrene and plastic weld at this end, so we may need to put some little support struts up, but I'm not sort of worried too much about the details at the moment. My initial plan is just to get this sort of roughly built, so I've got a couple of sheets left of this 1mm thick grey styrene sheet. My plan is to make it as wide as the sheet, and then it's going to be about 25cm tall, which should give us space to have two sets of figures, one on the top level and one on the bottom level. At this stage, you know, it's just a rough plan, so really what I've got to do is get cutting this styrene, and I'm going to cut the basic shapes out, and then we can sort of roughly put it together. There's a little bit of detailing I will do before I've actually plastic welded everything together. The floor sheet here I'm going to do a bit of scribing on, just to scribe on some interesting panels so that it's not just a flat surface. And on this gantry floor I'm going to cut out some holes so that we can put this mesh underneath. And again, if you've watched my diorama build on the Jabba's Palace, then you'll see exactly how I did it there. I'm not going to talk you through everything in this build. Most of the details are sort of covered in that video, but I'll show you the basics anyway as we go along. So let's get cutting and see about constructing this basic shape, see what it looks like. Okay, so that is all the pieces cut, and at the moment it doesn't look like much. It's just a pile of cut pieces. As you can see, I have started to cut some of the details in, as I said. So this is the gantry with the panels removed so that I can put some mesh in underneath that. And then on the floor piece, I've just scored some lines just using my scribe tool, just to add a few little sort of panel details. At the moment though, it really doesn't look like much at all. I've now just got to try and piece this together. This is pretty much all the styrene I have. So if this doesn't work, there's no going back. I'm just going to have to modify what I've made. But it's 2 sheets of styrene was all I had to use, and that is what I've used here. So yeah, I'm just going to start constructing. You can see sort of roughly what's going to go on. So that's the gantry. We've got a front panel to the gantry, just to give it some thickness. Then there are these little side pieces. So that's the side piece there. Those will make the gantry part. Then I've got this sort of angled piece at the back, and I've made these little wedges which will hold it out, so that needs to be stuck onto the back sheet of styrene. And because it is only 1mm thick styrene, I think it's going to be a bit floppy because the back panel is so tall. I have made these ribs and I'm going to plastic weld those onto the back of the styrene, and hopefully that will give it some structure. So yeah, let's just put this together and see what happens. I have a feeling it's going to be fairly floppy at the start until we start adding some sort of struts and things, but at least we'll be able to see the basic shape and see what's going on.
P-O-Y-P-O-L-L-O-Y. That is incorrect. Try again.
With those pieces all stuck together, you can see I'm starting to get something that looks like the drawings that I drew up. It's a fairly simple shape, so we've got a flat panel at the back. I've added this slight angle at the top, which is where the computer panel is going to go, and then a little angle at the bottom. We've got this flat surface here, which I did a little bit of scribing on, so you can see there are a few little sort of delicate panel lines on there, and it is starting to stand up. So this stands up, and it's a fairly good right angle, but only because I had to make a slight modification. My calculations were a little bit wrong, and it didn't sort of stand as square as I like, so I've actually just stuck an extra bit of 1mm styrene just in there, so there's a little bit of a sort of ugly gap on the side, but I'm not really going to worry about that because by the time it's all painted up, you're only going to be looking at the front. And here is the gantry section, as you can see, and that's also looking pretty good. So that's the sort of sewing mesh that I added underneath. Yeah, and I think by the time that's painted up, it's going to look pretty nice. I do think though that when I plastic weld this on, it's not going to be strong enough just held at the back here, and if you put figures on, it's going to slowly bend forward. So my original plan was to add some sort of support rails along the top here. I don't think I'm going to do those now. I'm going to leave them off because I think just putting figures on the top, it will look quite nice. But what we do need is some supports to hold this up. So when it's held there, we have some supports holding it from the front. And I found that some of this L-shaped styrene that I've used for another project, I've just cut a couple of pieces of that off at about the right height. And I'm going to use those to make some little supports at either end, I think that will look pretty reasonable. It sort of fits in with the style of the rest of the ship, the sort of semi-industrial look. So yeah, let's get that all stuck on and we can start painting. And there we go, that's the gantry now added. It seems pretty secure. Adding these two supports at the front, I think, is what it really needed. It just sort of gives it that little bit of extra sort of firmness. I'm only going to be putting 4 or 5 figures on this, so it's never going to have a huge weight on it, but you want it to feel pretty solid, and I think that works. So there's the sort of the basic sort of shape for the USS Cygnus computer console level. I'm really quite happy with how this has turned out. It's a little bit sort of scrappy and scruffy around the edges, but by the time we've painted that, I think all of those will get hidden and it will actually end up looking pretty nice. So the next thing to do is give it a coat of paint. I've been looking at the images that I have of the sort of USS Cygnus computer consoles, and I'm going to go with a few colours. I want the actual computer screen areas to be a black colour. So I need that part at the top black, and I need this part here black. I want the gantries to be a dark grey, and also the floor to be a dark grey. And if you look closely, you can see that the front edge of the gantry is actually a sort of burgundy red. So my plan is to give this one quick coat of a plastic primer spray just to get everything sort of started. Then I'm going to spray paint these top sections black and this sort of middle section black. Then I'm going to mask those off, and I will spray paint the gantry and the floor a dark grey, which I think I have out in my garage. Once all that's done, I'm going to hand paint the edge of this in a burgundy red just using some acrylic paint. So let's get this all painted. The paint is really starting to pull this together. As you saw, I painted it sort of black and then I did a grey colour over the gantry and the floor. The grey actually didn't turn out quite as dark as I'd wanted, and I found that I had some Tamiya smoke spray paint. And smoke is the stuff that you would spray on clear plastic to give you a sort of smoky window look, but it's actually worked really well spraying it over the grey surface. It just sort of dulled it down and given it a little bit of a sort of a dirty wash. Now I know the black hole universe is not like the Star Wars universe where everything is a bit dirty and grimy, so I've only done a sort of subtle wash on it, but it really does make quite a difference. So we've got a dark black background and a slightly greyer floor and gantry, and then of course I've just painted this sort of burgundy stripe around the edge of it. That is actually quite subtle when you watch the movie, but I thought I'd try and get it as close as I possibly could. But as you can see, it's looking a bit bare because what we really need is all of the computer screens. And to do the computer screens, I'm going to head on into Photoshop and make myself some custom stickers. So let's get those made. And here they are printed out onto some glossy sticky backed printer paper. As you can see, I've taken a few references from some sort of artwork that I've found and also references for some photos of the actual Cygnus bridge. And I'm pretty happy with the sort of overall look of them. They're a little bit cartoony, but also sort of quite in keeping with how you see it in the movie. So this is what we're going to stick onto these panels. I made a slightly smaller one for the top, which is going to fit on this angled one, slightly larger one on the bottom. All I've got to do is cut these out and stick them on. So let's do that. And so here we go. Here is the finished little display diorama of the USS Cygnus bridge, and I'm really happy with how this has turned out. It's not until you put those final pieces together that the thing finally comes to life, and as you can see, this has really worked. My initial sketches were fairly sort of basic, but I had an idea in my head of what I wanted to do, and this has turned out way better than I'd expected. It's really the stickers that are doing all of the work on this, so I'm glad that I put so much effort into getting them looking right. And if you want to have a go yourself, yourself at making something like this, I'm going to put the sticker file available on toy-polloi.com, so go there and download that and give it a go. All you need is a few sheets of styrene, a little bit of plastic weld, and I've used a little bit of mesh here just to make the gantry look a little bit more interesting, and then a bit of paint, and there you go. You can make something that looks really nice, and this is going to go straight on display here because I want to have all of my black hole figures displayed like this. I think it really shows them off to their fullest because they are absolutely fantastic figures. There's so much detail in them. Just displaying them on a plain background really doesn't do them justice. So all of my figures are now going to be displayed on this little mini USS Cygnus diorama. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it and want to help support the channel, then why not think about becoming a Patreon or YouTube channel member. You get early access to all of my restoration videos and also access to an exclusive series called On the Cutting Mat, where you'll see projects that you won't see anywhere else on this channel. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy-Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.